Hello, welcome to my channel. Today I'm excited to be talking about two wonderful and widely different books. The first is considered the first modern novel and perhaps one of the greatest literary works there are. And the second is arguably the greatest compendium of philosophical thought. Before we get any further, go grab a piece of your favorite beverage. I have my faithful cup of coffee right here. And don't forget to like and subscribe if you enjoy my content. So these are the books that I'll be talking about today. They're both relatively big, really interesting. But before we get into the books, just wanted to say that oftentimes you have readers in one camp or the other. Either they're in the fiction camp or in the non-fiction camp. And very seldom do they cross the pond over to the other side. And I really think that's a shame because you can really get so much from reading both types of fiction. And you get different things from a non-fiction book versus a fictional book. And I think oftentimes non-fiction books are intellectually stimulating and fictional books are emotionally stimulating. At least that's I think is at least a perception that people have in general. But I think as much as that is true, the opposite is also true. And there is a lot of value to be found in trying something new and perhaps picking up a book that you wouldn't traditionally pick up because you might just find out that you absolutely adored this book. And that's one of the reasons why I'm making this video, sort of highlighting a great fictional and non-fictional book to read. I also know that research suggests that women tend to gravitate towards fiction and men non-fiction. But it doesn't mean that it has to be this way. And sometimes it's good to step out of our comfort zone. And with this prejudice in mind, it could be a good idea to try and choose something different. Now, I also know that it's mostly women that read as opposed to men. So perhaps the first job will be to pick up a book for a man. And then if you're a woman, then maybe you can try and look at the non-fiction section as well, if you happen to fall in within this average patterns. Let's start with a non-fiction book, which is The History of Philosophy by A.C. Grayling. Now, Grayling is a British philosopher. He's a secular humanist, which is something that is good to know as you're reading the book because no book is objective. There is always a subjective factor, although I do have to say that I think he does a good job of trying to remain relatively objective in this book, which is a little bit different from, for instance, Bertrand Russell's book, The History of Western Philosophy, where he has a lot of subjective takes on the different thoughts of these philosophers. I think this book is also great because it spans a long time, 3 millennia, and it includes the Western tradition as well as sort of Indian philosophy, Chinese philosophy, I think Arabic Persian, and also some African philosophy. Obviously, it's primarily rooted in the Western tradition, which is what this British philosopher obviously knows the best. But then it's also more diverse, which is something you don't often find in these books. So the book is about 600 pages long, and it was first published in 2019. It includes, let me take a look at some of these contents here. So it's divided into pre-Socratic philosophers, then Socrates, Plato, Aristotle, Greek and Roman philosophy, after Aristotle. Then we have some medieval Renaissance philosophy, modern philosophy, and also philosophy in the 20th century. And then it moves on to the Indian, Chinese, Arabic, Persian, and African philosophy. It's a wonderful place to start if you're interested in philosophy, because you can essentially just look up the person that you're interested in. Let's say that is Thomas Aquinas. And then you can read what his sort of a synthesis of his thoughts. And then you can figure out whether you would like to learn more about him, then you can acquire more books, or you can use ChatGPT, whatever it is, to learn even more about the particular philosopher that you find interesting. It is quite a remarkable achievement to pack all of these ideas into one volume, and that's why I think this is an important book to have if you are interested in philosophy, of course, which you should be. So definitely go pick up this History of Philosophy by A.C. Grayling. Now let's move on to the second book, which is a book of fiction. It is Don Quixote by Miguel de Cervantes. Now this is a Spanish writer that lived during the 16th century. A very interesting guy. He was a man that experienced the hardships of life, and he sort of struggled financially throughout his life. He worked as a tax collector to get money on the side, as well as his writing career, sort of writing novels, poetry, plays, etc. Now, Don Quixote is considered the first modern novel, and it is probably also among one of the greatest literary works that there are. Obviously, he was ahead of his time, and that is one of the reasons why this is such a central piece of literature to this day. Despite knowing full well how difficult life can be, Cervantes was also very aware of how important it is to have this imaginative, this playful and magical factor in life to make life interesting. And that is one of the major themes also in this book. There is this line between, reality and illusion, idealism and realism. It's a real treat to read this book. It's quite big, but it's a lot of fun. He is very humorous in his writing. There are so many subplots and wonderful little stories inside of the main plot of this book. And it is worth noting that this has influenced some of the greatest writers that there have been. I mean, Dostoevsky, Flaubert, Camus, I think the list goes on. Now this story is primarily of a man called Alonso that reinvents himself as Don Quixote, which is the title of the book, where he literally believes that he is a knight's errant, and he is enwrapped in this illusion and fantasy from reading all of this romantic medieval books about chivalry. And he goes on an adventure to revive chivalry and to defend the helpless. And along the way, he picks up a companion who becomes his squire, namely Sancho Panza. There's so much to this book, and it includes timeless themes. It has to do with friendship and loyalty, pragmatism and idealism, and it beautifully depicts some of the contradictions in our human nature, and perhaps most importantly, it comments on madness and perhaps this necessity of a tinge of madness to be present in our everyday lives. Otherwise, everything becomes too sterile. That's at least the takeaway I have from this book. His language is so poetical and lyrical, even in translation, which is why I think this book has stood the test of time and why it's so important to this day. So there you have it. Those are two books that I would highly recommend you check out. One non-fiction and one fiction book. So each camp is happy, but do consider stepping across the pond and joining the other camp once in a while. I hope that you enjoyed the video. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you next time.